What is going on, everyone, and welcome to the TDR Traded Black Podcast Special Edition here on a Tuesday. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Yes, earnings seasons continues, and we've got a big one here today. A lot of you are already commenting because our guest is a popular one here on our YouTube channel. So let's get right into it. Welcome in our TDR co-host, Anthony Varell. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
First time that you're going to be on with Raj Grover from High Tide, and one guy that knows the High Tide story better than anyone, Guap. Good to see you, sir. Happy Tuesday. How excited are you?
I'm pretty stoked. I've been sweating with nerves all day, giggling uncomfortably, and also just super stoked to interview my cannabis business hero, Raj Grover.
Well, let's welcome in that cannabis hero, Raj Grover, back to the podcast, CEO of High Tide, which trades on the Nasdaq under the ticker symbol HITI. Good to see you, sir. How are things?
Good to see you all. Shad, Anthony, great to see you for the first time. And I am super excited about the number one barnacle getting to ask me. You get to ask me any questions you want, Guap, because you know, as much as you're my fan, I'm doing that vice versa with you. Okay, so super excited to be here with you.
Yeah, I was
with all of you.
I was going to highlight that before we got going, but Raj is basically giving the green light to Guap here today to say you can ask anything. So let's dive into it. Yeah, let's dive into this. Highlight your Q1 2024 earnings. Some of the highlights include 128.1 million compared to 118 million a year ago during the same time. Gross profit increased to 36 million. Adjusted EBITDA increased to 10.4 million compared to 5.5 million a year ago at this time. And you also generated 3.6 million of positive free cash flow for the quarter, where I know you have mentioned in the past, this was your main focus in 2023. So based off these latest numbers, what's the statement you want to say about the Canadian cannabis market and the footprint you're manufacturing here in early 2024, Raj?
Look, I mean, Shad, you summed it up really well. All of those are the high notes of the quarter that we just reported. And I'd like to say that we have arrived. I'd like to say, where are the investors? You know, there are early investors that invested in some big names that were big names back then, but our performance is practically leading this landscape here in Canada. You can compare us with anyone. So I'd like to say that we're here, and what can I do here to generate some more investor interest? I'd love to ask you guys, ask me any questions that you think relevant, that we can generate that investor interest again, because the 2018, 2017, 2016 ride, we weren't a public company then. And I wish we were a public company then, because you can clearly see what we've achieved in the last 4 or 5 years. But if we were here back then, when the rest of my competitors were having a good time, I think we would be north of a couple $2 billion right now.
Yeah. Well, Samantha White says 1 billion in revenue by 2030. So goals for sure. But you've got a strong fan base. I know in addition to executing, you've got a great marketing strategy. Very well versed, when it comes to really understanding the space and knowing who your consumer is, who your investor is, the conversations that you and I have had in the past. But how do you think, if you drum all that up, there's been a lot of trials and tribulations within the Canadian market, but it's really good to hear stories like this because you're emerging basically as the Canadian leader right now. But how are you doing it? Like, if you had to pride it around one thing, what would it be?
Differentiated thinking and execution shot, right? You got to come up with a good strategy, and you should be able to execute it. And you need you need your team to do it. And I've been blessed with an extremely good team. We come up with some very differentiated strategies, with some very thoughtful strategies, and then we give our full focus and attention to it to make things happen. Like, the discount club model was a revolutionary idea at that time. Can we build it into this membership-based model? Would we be able to collect paid revenue through these memberships? All of that became a reality. Today, 32,000 does not seem like a big number, but we grew 247% year over year on our elite membership. Where does this go in 5 years? So if you have the vision to see what can be accomplished in the next 3 to 5 to 10 years, and where you can take your business and you remain focused, everything is possible.
What's your membership total up to now?
So we have 1.32 million members of the Cabana Club. I believe we are up 35 or 37% year over year, which is exceeded all my expectations, honestly. And I don't think it stops here, Shad. I think we go north of 2 million members in the next couple of years, because we're going to continue growing here in Canada.
That's amazing. All right, I'm going to exit stage left now and let you boys take over. But I know Guap's itching to ask some questions. Anthony, Guap, either one of you, go first.
Yeah, I was going to start with the same store sales. I know you reported 100% uptick in same store sales. I mean, what are you attributing that to? I mean, going through your model, is it products? Is it consumer loyalty? Like, how are you achieving these numbers at scale consistently throughout the business?
Again, right. So, just like I said, you need to come up with a strategy, and you need to stick to it, and you need to execute that strategy. So, we took a deep dive. Fortunately for us, we have a lot of data coming through from all of our retail stores. And we took a deep dive about 3 years ago when the market was, again, everyone was doing the same thing. And we're like, what differentiates us? You have cannabis stores across from each other. And it's just too many shops coming up, hyper competitive landscape. So we said, what differentiates us? And we looked at our retail ecosystem that no one else had. And then we took a deep dive into the data that we were getting, and we realized 72% of the cannabis consumer that comes and shops with us is value focused. They're always looking for deals. They want good weed, but they want it for a good price. And we were like, there's definitely something here. We were already leading the charge in terms of memberships. We had started a loyalty program much more earlier on than most of our competitors. And we already had about 245,000 club members, if I'm not wrong. So we decided to leverage that customer base that we already had. We decided to leverage the data that we already had, which was 72% of the customers that we have are looking for value-focused products or value-focused deals. And we decided to do things differently. We wanted to not only fight on price, which is easier to do, but then again, we're a public company, and 80% of the landscape is independents. And independents don't have the same capital leverage. Now, I'm an independent. I've come from the same world, but we've graduated to public markets. We have access to capital. 80% of the landscape did not. We had 245,000 club members. The remaining country was nowhere near it. So I decided to leverage those two fronts and say, why don't we target the everyday user of cannabis? And that's exactly what we did. We went after the 72%, and the end result is 100% same-store sales growth in 2 years, and it's not stopping here.
It's great.
And then I guess my next question is in regards to actual pricing. Like, what are you seeing in terms of like pricing trends? Like, has the price of cannabis stabilized in Canada when we're talking about finished products?
Yes, it's definitely stabilized, Anthony. But we've been coming down for quite a bit now, right? Yeah. And there's still 5 years of cannabis sitting in the licensed producer vaults here in Canada. So there's still a lot of weed. So there's always that risk that can prices come down a little bit more. But eventually, even if that happens, Anthony, at some point, the market is going to level up, and then things are going to start getting more and more stable. So it won't be a downward spiral forever. And I do want to point out, when these prices get more and more competitive, it's absolutely dismal and death sentences for the licensed producers. But for the retailers, we get to convert illicit market even faster, because I am marking it up at the same level. Now, sure, my revenue growth may slow, but my bottom line will remain intact because of but I'll also attract more consumers from the illicit market, which is still around 30-35% in Canada on a national level, 45% in Ontario. That's why Ontario increased its cap, 20% in Alberta. So we still have a lot of business to take over. These are problems for the licensed producers, but not for the retailers.
That's interesting. Guap, go ahead, bud.
All right. So we know you have a $500 million run rate in Canada. You're reporting free cash flow. You're break even on net income. But I want you to take me all the way back. We started at the bottom. Now we're here. Take me all the way back to the first store, and give us that origin story, if you would, briefly.
Sure. I told you get to ask me any questions you want, but this is an easy one. So basically, come from an entrepreneurial family, tried my hand at a lot of small businesses, was very successful with everything that I did. And, I'm from Toronto, Shad, just like you. And I told my then girlfriend, now wife, that, I used to, just hang out, party, and as a young adult making a lot of money. I'm like, I can make a lot of money, I just can't keep a lot of money. So I'm like, why don't we? That's a true story. So I'm like, why don't we try? I'm going to diversify a little bit and move things to Alberta a little bit, because Alberta has been on a rise here in Canada for quite some time. Because of the natural resources we have here and the buying power we have here in Alberta. So I decided to set up a business here in Alberta while I still had my businesses in Ontario. And Alberta almost immediately took off for me. And I've said this before in previous interviews that, I was on a buying trip looking for fashion accessories and body jewelry and stumbled across consumption accessories. I've always taken calculated risks in my life and kind of knew, the margin arbitrage that I had for consumption accessories. Shipped $10,000 of worth of product in DHL from New Delhi. By the time I got here, the product was already here. Sold that overnight. Did that a couple of times and said, okay, I need to open up a store and then maybe build a chain of stores and then distribute it to myself and everybody else to make it something significant. And that's how Smoker's Corner was born, which is HITI's predecessor, which was just one store with a $50,000 investment. It was a differentiated store because I wasn't a user at that time, and every other competitor that I checked out, and I only saw 2 or 3, and then I'm like, this is easy. They were kind of like darkish and dingy-ish looking stores, and I wanted something bright, something very appealing. And I started Smoker's Corner, which almost immediately took off. And because I had those import-export roots, one, growing up in a very entrepreneurial family, that's what my dad, my grandpa, my uncles, they still do that. Second, I already had my setup overseas in Indonesia, Thailand, China, and India. So I decided trying my hand at consumption accessories. That's how Smoker's Corner was born. Then RGR started in 2011, which was distributing to myself and everybody else. Then I started Famous Brands in 2016, where I went to Snoop and asked him for his license to produce consumption accessories. He was on board, went to Paramount Pictures and a bunch of other players. And then, I was always innovative enough and intuitive enough to know where the puck is going. So when Prime Minister Trudeau came into power and said recreational cannabis was going to be legal in Canada, or was going to become a reality, I quickly started plotting my moves that I don't want to become obsolete, that I have these head shops or smoke shops. Right. And then people are not going to go buy their cannabis and then go somewhere else to buy their accessories. It's just going to become a mismatch of a concept. And I already have these customers that are buying these pipes and bongs and vapes to go use it for their cannabis. So that is how I started making the rounds of public markets. And I think I raised $18.5 million the first time I ever raised any money. And for the record, I'd like to point out that I had $9.5 million in retained earnings in 9 years of doing business as a consumption accessories shop. I used to make more money then. I've started to make more money now, so I'm happy. But that is kind of the origin of High Tide.
What a great story. Great story.
So is there any point in time where you think you'll buy a Canadian LP on the cultivation side and get into that facet of the business, or do you want to you own retail in Canada? I mean, I'm assuming you're at 160 plus locations. There's a saturation point that you want to get to. Do you ever foresee getting into the cultivation business?
So look, Anthony, my philosophy is never say never, right? Business evolves, business changes. Yeah. It's state by state, it's province by province, it's different jurisdictions, and now countries are opening up. So I would say this, that I'm always open to business, right? But I live for good business. So when you look around and you have cannabis here for 5 years stored in licensed producer vaults, and there's just an insane amount of capex that you need to set up these facilities and to maintain these facilities, not just what you invest up front, but what you need to put into it to keep the ball rolling, right? Yeah. For those reasons, and the fact that I've never felt like a farmer at heart, and this is why I'm saying I need to keep that strategy open. My strength has always been retail distribution, and that is sort of High Tide's personality. This is exactly why I acquired Queen of Bud just a couple of days ago, right, which is one of the best brands in the country, but there's no facilities attached with it. And myself having these customer-facing, outlets, or we are the end customer-facing destination, I get to promote whatever brands I want to and generate about $500 million of business. So I can promote Queen of Bud and make it the next big brand. I don't need to go set up grow facilities and do it that way. But I'll say that with a disclaimer. When I get into the US, all bets are off. If we need to go vertical in certain states, we're going to absolutely do that. But I've got a differentiated strategy which will match our personality very much. when we get to the US.
So you do plan to come down here into the US.
I'm coming, Anthony. I'm coming for sure. I'm on Nasdaq's mercy right now. But it can be a good thing and a bad thing. I've got all the time in the world here to dominate Canada. We're at 10% market share right now. The long-term goal is 15%. I think I will breach that goal because we can still add about 130, 140 locations. But then, of course, before US, we may be in Germany. Czech Republic is very active right now, talking about some momentum, which is exciting. So there's going to be so much opportunity for us. Everybody's caught in the MSO craze. We're already a multi-province operator here. I know it doesn't sound very sexy, but we have that same experience and one of the most differentiated concepts. So when we enter the US, which is a wide landscape, a large landscape, opportunity is not over. It's not going to get old in a year or two, right? Sometimes coming from behind as a second mover is a bigger advantage because you have complete visibility into what you're getting into.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you start to look at some of these markets with the maturation curve, and you can go in there and pick up distressed assets that people have just been misappropriating capital to for some time, and you go in and pick up a portfolio of retail pretty easy in some key markets. What were you going to say, Bob?
No, bingo, Anthony. Yeah, agreed. So I did want to ask about future growth because I know that's what the folks out there want to hear about. And you're talking about starting to talk a little bit about the U.S. Biggie says in the 10 Crack Commandments, never let them know your next move. But I'm going to ask about some of your next moves here. So Canada, exciting news out of Ontario. I figured you want to touch on that. How many locations you have, how many you can have, what that equals in terms of revenue.
I should really be telling you that I'm following Biggie's advice here, but no, I will share a little bit. Okay, so and this is all out in the open. We actually work towards that push to convince the government in terms of bringing the illicit market rates down and making the market a bit more of a fair landscape. And now that that market opportunity is 150 stores in Ontario, so we get to add 90 odd locations in Ontario. Our average revenue. Shad, our average revenue per Ontario store is $3.5 million right now. It was 3.6, but we opened a whole bunch of new locations, so that average is going to move up and down a little bit. But our peer average is only 1.2, so we're massively higher than our peers. Conservatively speaking, if we do $3 million, we take another $500,000 out. Another 90 stores, that alone is a massive opportunity. It's north of $250 million. And we believe that we can easily get that in Canada now, right? Ontario is the largest province in the country. We get to add another 90 or so stores in Ontario alone. You can add another $250 million a store in just that projection. Then we still have room in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba to continue to grow. So we feel we can end up with 300 locations and close to $800-900 million in revenue.
Not to mention, Toronto remains one of the fastest growing cities in North America, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Have you had conversations quite a bit with Premier Doug Ford? Like, I know when he basically opened up the floodgates for a lot of dispensary owners to basically open up, I don't think it was all that well thought through. And there's definitely been some mistakes, but I'm curious, like, how open, receptive it is working with the Premier and the province, for them to basically double and twofold the increased amount of licenses and dispensaries within the actual province of Ontario. But what's it like, I guess, dealing within that government, and how receptive and open are they for expansion?
Look, I mean, our GR team is probably one of the most active GR teams in cannabis. We're leading the charge now. When you're leading the country and you're doing the sales, we're doing the sales, the type of sales that we are doing, the type of growth that we have ahead, the type of employment we are providing. We're 1,600 plus employees in the country now, or overall as HITIers. It's definitely up to us to move the puck, and the governments don't know everything. They also need the industry to tell them how things are going. And it's no secret that cannabis industry, led mostly by the licensed producers, but also retailers now. There's bankruptcies left, right, and center on both sides. Yeah. It's been really moving and shaking things here in Canada, and it's just negative headlines and negative news, hence the downward stock prices as well that we have to deal with. But this is why, we've been very actively lobbying all fronts of government, not just Ontario, but Alberta, Ontario, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, even British Columbia, believe it or not, Quebec is not giving us that opportunity yet, which is fine. But we're definitely lobbying various levels of governments interprovincially to make sure the governments get to hear from us, hear from the industry on what is really happening. And for example, this particular situation in Ontario, it took us a good year, but we had multiple case studies. Illicit rates in Ontario are sitting at 45%. That money belongs to come to the legal fold. Alberta is already down to 20%, which is amongst the lowest in the country. That metric alone is enough for a province to see, okay, hell is not broken loose. And if these sales come into legal fold by just upping a store cap, this is a common sense approach. And there was also some groups through franchise agreements that could open unlimited stores, or that could just keep going, which is also unfair to every other corporate group that is not a franchise or a licensing system. So we showed those points to the government, and the government was very receptive in terms of what was fair, and most importantly, what had to be done to take the illicit market down.
Yeah, you were
I had
saying.
I had a question in regards to BC. I know in 2022, LPs can actually now sell directly to retail, correct? So there's that the third party's not sitting in the middle anymore. Does that mean that your margin is do you have a bigger margin coming out of BC versus the other provinces, or did the government pick up that slack in a different way?
Yeah, they're making the markup anyway, Anthony.
I figured.
No.
I wanted to ask though because I was curious.
Yeah, no, BC's collecting that regardless. I believe it's a 15% markup. That even though it's just direct facilitation from the LPs, but the markup is exactly the same. The provincial markup that has not gone away. I would be the one delivering that news to you if that would have happened, but no, it's not happening.
Guap, continue on, my friend.
Yeah, the Ontario Cannabis Store and High Tide are two of the more profitable cannabis companies in Canada for sure. I wanted to throw you some curveballs about the stock, right? So I'm a High Tide investor. It's well documented. I see these I see free cash flow, break even net income. I'm excited about the new Queen of Bud M&A, all that, and the stock drops the day of the earnings. What's up with that?
It's funny you asked me that, but I'm glad I get to reply to this. Listen, we have some funny conspiracy theories in our company going on, for some time. And again, they're just conspiracy theories that we feel that maybe, a couple of competitors or one or two or whatever who can't keep up with us, but can afford to buy high and sell low, maybe just do that on our earnings day to just ruin our earnings momentum. But cash doesn't last forever. It eventually runs out. And if you zoom out, High Tide was up, 30, 40%. We're still up amongst our peers in that particular time period. So, but that's just a conspiracy theory. We can park that to the side. The other joke I can crack here is maybe I need to deliver a crappy quarter, Guap, and things will turn around, because we've had so many record-setting quarters that it's weird that it happens always on the earnings day. We always get a run up into earnings. This time we did not, but on the day off when we announced Queen of Bud, I think we were up 10%. And then sure enough, next day with volume, we came down. But this happened to us in the last year as well. But in the same the same trading day, it went back up, and it was down 13, and it closed at like 3 or 4% down. So, and then the next day it started going up. So I don't know what to tell you, my friend. I am in the same boat. I am the largest shareholder of High Tide still. I am very, very bullish on our company. I continue to buy more stock. I did some insider buying in November, led by myself, and others participated too. I did that in March of 2023 as well. And I still believe so much in our company, and we're going to make it, and we're going to do some big things. But this short-term noise, which can also be a bit of the Canadian overhang, right? Like, again, we're a product of our environment. If the LPs are suffering and there's just so many bankruptcies, every other week there's a major one going down, there's very little appetite for investors to get it wrong, right? And then just the MSO fever, I would say, or just the bullishness on MSOs right now, for the right reasons or not, is also maybe having a bit of an overhang on us. But if we continue to deliver, we are the largest holding for one of the ETFs on the Canadian level now. And, things like this will happen. More institutional capital will come into High Tide and will drive that share price up, right? But I wish I could give you more, my friend, but I've told you, from conspiracy theories to delivering a crappy quarter, we've considered everything at this point.
Yeah.
Raj,
you're on the Nasdaq. You don't have a grow op. I would feel like that, it feels like that should be compliance and custody friendly for institutions. But so what is the team doing to court those institutions? Maybe there's not an appetite right now, but is it put it on the watch list and schedule 3 hits and then they pour in? I mean, I'm sort of sitting here wondering, the average volume is higher since you went to the Nasdaq, but it's still nothing compared to what some of these LPs enjoy. So.
Oh, 100%, Guap. And I've answered this question in my Reddit AMA a couple of times, but I'll just for the record, let me tell you this again. So we were not a public company prior to 2018. When we debuted, things were on the way down. Like I was down 30 or 40% in my first month of trading without reporting a single number. We went up, we went public at $100 million valuation at 50 cents a share. Next thing I know, I was 29 cents a share in a matter of no time, right? Without delivering even any real financials at that point. But prior to that, there were exponential increases in all of the LP names. Some of the names that were $16 billion, I wouldn't name anybody, but everyone is intelligent enough to look them up. $16 billion has come down to 200 million. They're 20, 30 million more than me. Another big name that was close to $20 billion has come down to 300 million. Another big name that was $2 billion has gone bankrupt. So if I was there, should I have been a 5 or 10 or $15 billion company? I'm not saying that would be fair. We had not performed at that time. We were just debuting, but we've gone up from $8 million in revenue 5 years ago to $500 million in annual revenue. But I've not got those sunny days because of our debut and the timing and the innings in the cannabis market, right? And now it's all substance. And now it's all like, may the best competitor win, may the best player win. And we just keep on putting these good results. And at some point, something's got to give, even if we miss that initial run. And remember, when those initial volumes got built, it got built with millions and millions of shareholders in it, right?
Yes.
We have thousands of shareholders. And these bigger LPs have millions of shareholders, right? And that makes a big difference. And they've been on the bigger exchanges for a long, long time with institutional participation at that time. And that triggers certain algos when these run-ups come, even on our earnings day, when we had these stellar earnings. I would call this quarter as one of the best quarters we've ever delivered. I loved Q3 too. Q4 was amazing. But this is one of the best. We got FCF. We're 500 million plus annually. We got break-even net income, which was a huge surprise to me. We're a growth stage company. We still need to do financings and build the company. It's not easy to do that. Everything checked, right? But we were down on the news while some of the meme stocks were up 20, 15, 20%. It's mind-blowing. But I much rather not be a meme stock and much rather do fundamental things for my company, and our company have fundamentals so investors can buy with confidence. And at some point, things will align themselves. They just have to. That's just how things work.
That's why we're here right now. I think a lot of companies from the early days, crazy valuations, but when we see the size of those valuations, I think many people believe that we can get there again, which is why there's so much upside potential. Just want to say, everybody, thank you for checking in here today. This is the TDR Trade of Black podcast. Anthony Burrell, Guap, and myself here with Raj Grover, who is the CEO of HITI. I do want to say something. Happy Glass writes, the Canadian opportunity is underappreciated. Really like what Raj is doing. I want to ask that question is, what do you think right now in 2024 is the biggest misconception about the Canadian cannabis market?
I think I would have to say, Shad, that, that all fingers are equal. That's how Canadian cannabis market is being considered. I mean, look at the concept that we've carved out. Look at what we've achieved. It's been record breaking on every metric. There's some other players as well that have done some great things, but it's just being lumped in that one big bucket of one small country, small population, federal legalization gone wrong. Sure. But there's other bright spots which people are overlooking. And again, investors have been burnt. Canadian investors have lost a lot of money in cannabis, so I feel for them. And I've been one of those investors where I should have only bet on my company, but I also bet on some of the other companies as well. And it's not a good feeling. So I know how that feels. But again, you got to look at things objectively, and you got to look at things individually on what these companies are doing, and you're going to find some clear winners. And I really hope investors really see HITI as a winner.
Well said. Well said. I actually think There is so much excitement in this space here in 2024. We've had some pretty influential guests on the last couple of weeks. I'll ask you the same question. I don't know how much you've been following the news out of Washington, and you talk about the U.S. market and how you want to be there. But yesterday we had Charlie Bachtell on from Cresco, who believes that rescheduling will be announced between now and July. We had Don Murphy on, lobbyist, who now believes that it's going to happen between now and July. If rescheduling is announced, and we do all think it's going to be announced, what does that do for your company overnight?
Look, I think anything that happens in terms of a positive in the US or Canada, it's good for the entire industry, right? So I will take the positive to start with. But then if there's some safe harbor language that accompanies rescheduling news or post rescheduling news at some times, because the world of cannabis continues to get normalized, I think that would be a game changer for our company. But like I said, Chad, we're so busy in Canada, whether you make $800 million in revenue, I'm talking about future revenue here, $900 million in future revenue, south of the border or north of the border. Bottom line is, do you make money, and how much money do you make? And which markets do you operate in? So we get to really focus and dominate Canada. Germany opens up. We do the same thing. We get in that business early. And then US, we will have the second mover advantage, but with a very revolutionary model that we're going to bring to the US, right? It's not something that everybody else is doing. So we already have that carved in advantage. So, I would say I would have to agree with the guest on your show that I also feel that it can happen maybe by July. But to us, we're looking forward to that some language in relation to the Nasdaq safe harbor language.
That's great. Sounds like you've learned a lot. You made a lot of money. You said you might have spent a lot when you're in your 20s, but now you know how to make a lot of money, and you want to keep that and preserve that, right?
Look, you always gotta cycle your money, right? I'm not the advice that I'm giving, or no advice that I'm giving here is not hold on to your money, but I guess you get wiser with age, right? So you make your moves accordingly.
Yeah. Do you mind? No, I'm not going to ask you how old you are.
I just passed. I'll tell you this. I just passed the 420. I'll tell you my age. I'm 43 years old now.
43 years old. Look what you've accomplished. Good for you, my friend. Well, if there's anybody else that wants to ask any questions, I know there's a lot of people. Go ahead, Guap.
I've got about 20 more. No, I'd love to hear more about the Queen of Bud brand. It's the most recent M&A. There were a lot of questions online about it. I know you put a tweet out about it, but I figure here in video format, you could explain a little bit more about what that looks like long term.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, super excited about the Queen of Bud. Ashley Newman is a very known personality in cannabis. The biggest rationale on why we did the Queen of Bud was exactly what Anthony was talking about. Are you going to get into grow at some point, Raj, or you're going to keep it limited to retail distribution and brands? And my answer is retail distribution and brands for as long as I can. And with Queen of Bud, I get this margin enhancing opportunity where, customers cannot price shop. So for the record, Queen of Bud generated $8.5 million in sales from 2021 to now. We paid $1 million for this purchase. It doesn't get better than that. Exactly. But I didn't want to misguide investors and put these big numbers in a press release when we're trying to make this a white label brand. We don't have a lot of hope. Neither do we want to push this brand excessively to third parties, because our whole concept is, if you're an elite member, if you're a Cabana Club member, you're getting quality selection, quality prices, the widest opportunities that you'll only get at Canna Cabana. And Queen of Bud is going to help us solve that problem. We already have accessories brands. We have like north of 15, 20 accessory brands. We already have CBD brands, and New Leaf, Fab, and Blessed. These are international CBD brands, very, very established. And with Queen of Bud being so popular in Canada, we've now started, opening this line of cannabis brands development. So we're going to start with Queen of Bud. We're going to try and perfect this model. We're going to prove it to our investors. This is why we bought it. And then I might buy some more, because then you're bringing more and more margin in house. If I can extract another 5 to 7% on this very unique SKU portfolio that Ashley's developed, her SKUs are crystal inspired, and their products like rose petal blunts. They're just absolutely gorgeous, absolutely innovative and creative. And we can provide this selection and add another 5 to 7% margin that is not price comparable amongst other retailers. Well, it's all going to go back to the bottom line. So that was the rationale. And we just only paid $1 million for that acquisition.
So you sell cannabis in Canada under the brand via white label agreements, as opposed to having to make large CapEx investments, right?
As simple as that, Chad.
Yeah, that's well thought out. $1 million. That's you must be happy, I would think, but I can understand why a lot of the investors are following this company closely. Mungie Boy writes, what is the general sentiment of institutionals when you try and sell the story to them? You want to share some of the feedback? I know you touched on it briefly, Guap.
Yeah, look, that's a great question. And the feedback always, what I'm surprised by not seeing more volume in our stock right now is, I do a lot of desk presentations. Vahan accompanies me on many of the desk presentations. Vahan also does desk presentations. Me and Omar, we're dividing and conquering. Me and Omar are going to Berlin, again, meeting up with institutions, meeting up with industry participants. Vahan is going to Benzinga. We're constantly doing trade shows. We're constantly doing desk presentations, constantly talking to the institutions. But the general sentiment that we get is, we're not touching anything cannabis. You only saw some momentum in MSOs only after the Schedule 3 news, right? There's no, otherwise it was dead. I mean, look at poor MSOs have come down so much. It's unbelievable, right? And only after this positive momentum, did you start seeing something. And I'm telling you, I don't even think this is institutional money yet. I think this is retail money. I think institutional money will come. They're patient money. They will come, but when they have a clear path ahead, until then, they're not touching it. And then you lump that with a Canadian story, and it's like, yeah, we're on the sidelines right now. You're doing great, Raj. HITI is doing great things, but we're just parked on the side on cannabis right now. When we get into cannabis, you're the name that we're considering. That's what we hear all the time.
Anyone else? We good? All right. Well, this has been good, to say the least. So you're not, I know some of your team members are going to be at Benzinga next month in Florida.
Vahan's going to be in Benzinga.
Okay.
Nice.
Well, we'll have to sit down with him because we are actually renting a cargo van. It's got quite the setup on the inside, and we're going to be doing some car style interviews once again, like we usually do down in Florida. So I just actually text Mitch. I don't know if you got the picture, but we want to bring up the picture. There we go.
That is cool. Wow,
Taking place.
nice. I'm going to miss that shot, so you're going to have to do another one.
Good stuff, my friend. Or how we just do a cross-country tour across Canada this summer. How's that sound?
That works too.
That'd be fun. Yeah. Listen, congrats, obviously, on the latest numbers. Always love having you on. I know it gets a good response, too, from a lot of our viewers and especially a lot of your investors. But keep up the great work, and let's keep in touch, okay?
Thank you so much, guys. And, of course, the number one barnacle. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Thanks, Raj. That was great. Man, that guy knows what he's doing. Like,
it's an impressive business.
When he speaks, everything is so detailed and thought through, which is great when you look at a CEO, which is why a lot of people are believers in that company. But
founder-led, all hustle, I respect the hustle, and also just I think the part that gets really lost about their story is all these different revenue streams they have: the CBD, the C's, the kiosks, the data, some of the brands they're bringing on. That's all generating a pretty nice list of high lifetime value cannabis consumers that they can cross market. So the digital marketer in me says they're building a master list of people who spend thousands of dollars worth on cannabis.
Yeah,
that's the data that's going to be really useful come partnership time in the US or online sales or that kind of thing. So that's what I'm excited for, and that's just floating in the background, right? So it's nothing they talk about. I think that's falling into the Biggie don't tell him your next move kind of. He never talks about it.
Yeah, Anthony, you see the conviction when he said, "Oh, I'm coming to the US." I thought that was a good angle that you brought up, but when you look at some of these portfolios that have been pretty much gassed by a lot of unresponsible, irresponsible, I should say, operators for quite some time. I was actually going to ask him if there's any specific markets in the US that actually interest him more than anything, but I think that's too tough.
If I had to guess, he'd probably go into California, Colorado, or one of those markets first, because I mean, if he goes in there and deploys the discount model, he'll start competing right away. In regards to gathering up market share. I'm also going to guess that the US assets that he has on the product side with the ancillary products probably already has data on several markets to jump into right away as well. as far as customer nurturing.
Yeah, I think Anthony's on the money because I think he's going to look for markets that look like mini Canadas where they're hyper competitive.
Which is California, Colorado, low barrier entry.
They have a
distressed
GMP,
assets.
Yeah, they have a GMP facility making CBD vegan soft gels in Colorado right now. So that's my guess. He'll never say one way or another.
Missouri, Oklahoma. Those are all markets you can go into from a retail perspective, like very quickly.
Yep. Christian, thanks for the kind notes as well. Lake Drinker, I like the handle name. Thanks for doing this interview, guys. Hope we see more of Raj. You will see more of Raj. Why not? You know, great story at least. Before I let you guys go, I do want to bring up real quick Charlie Bachtell yesterday. I loved how I asked that question when he basically said, do you think it happens between now and July rescheduling? And his response was one word. And he was like, yes. I did find out afterwards that if there's any CEO who's more connected to Washington, it's Charlie Bachtell from Cresco. So
I was putting him in the chat saying, like, if you look, there's someone put out a list about lobbying dollars from the cannabis industry, and yes, Cresco's number one on that list.
Yep.
Good interview. Charlie and Kim both, they're not afraid to spend money to further their business from a political perspective.
You get the idea, though. Cresco, Trulieve, GTI, they're the hardest CEOs to get through for interviews for us, but they got their heads down. They're doing their work, right? So you can't argue because actions speak louder than words. Anyways, gents, appreciate the time. Hope everybody enjoyed this Tuesday edition here of the TDR Traded Black podcast. Quick reminder, make sure to click I should say smash that like button, leave some comments below. As usual, YouTube, they love lots of likes, they love lots of comments. So if you can, leave as many comments and likes as you can. As well, log on to our Baked In newsletter. We actually launched our latest research report today. It's Tilray. You'll have some interesting takes on what our head of research, Bill McNarland, outlined in his take and why it is a buy rating right now and what's the forecast over the next 12 months. So all that and more in our latest research that you can find by logging on to the Baked In newsletter with their latest research report with Tilray and a few others coming up later this week. Gents, appreciate the time. Let's check back in tomorrow as we got Matt Hawkins on from Entourage Effect Capital to talk more about the private side, what he's seeing, and what the overall interest is amongst institutional investors should we get rescheduling announced in the near-term future. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Look forward to it.
Rising tide raises all ships.
That's right. Rising tides. Rising. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. And if you want to learn more about the emerging industries that we cover, then leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to interview, the questions you want asked, and the information that you want to learn. We want to hear from you. As usual, click on that bell for all notifications to get the latest information. Share this video with your network, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel because we would not be here